And here to sing it for us tonight is Josh Superno. He is the worship leader at Cheshire Baptist Church.
Testing 1, 2. Does that sound good? I'm looking at a masterpiece. I'm staring at a work of art. I'm listening to a symphony with every beat of your tiny heart. It used to be a choice to make, but now I think you've chosen me. 'Cause I see 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, and I know this is meant to be. Oh, I don't believe in accidents. Miracles, they don't just happen by chance. As long as my God holds the world in his hands, I know that there's no such thing as unplanned. Ooh. Broken turns to beautiful. I see you stand in front of my eyes, and every single breath you breathe is destiny love has brought to life. You used to be my story's end, but now the future's all I see. Instead of asking who you might have been, I'm wondering who you're gonna be. 'Cause I don't believe in accidents. Miracles, they don't just happen by chance. As long as my God holds the world in his hands, I know that there's no such thing as unplanned. Ooh. Every life deserves a voice. Every child deserves a chance. You are more than just a choice. There's no such thing as unplanned. Every life deserves a voice. Every child deserves a chance. You are more than just a choice. There's no such thing as unplanned. Every life deserves a voice. Every child deserves a chance. You are more than just a choice. There's no such thing as unplanned.
I don't know how I thought I was going to talk after he sang that. It's a beautiful and anointed song. It's my turn to give the update for the center. So I want to share with you everything that's been going on at the center. It's usually for the past year, but in this case it's going to be for the past 2 years since we gathered together due to the pandemic. So right after the last banquet in 2019, when we were all here in the same place, we moved to Pittsfield, where we're in the center of the county, where we could service, we thought, the entire county. We felt that was God's plan, and so we did. And we had a great open house that many of you attended. We had a great training for our new volunteers, which some of you attended. And we opened and we were expectant, and here we go, and then came COVID. So we shut down for that first part, the mandatory shutdown part that was from, I think, middle of March into end of May. and then we could open in phase 1. So we opened right up in May as soon as we could. But something that we did during that time, that the Lord actually spoke to the president of our board, Lynn Toole, and she talked to me about having our own 24-hour helpline. So we looked into it, and we got our own cell phone for the center, and we have a 24-hour call or text helpline. And I corrected myself when I say hotline. It's not a hotline, because then you'd be like talking to someone and have to keep the line open. It's a helpline. So I get texts all the time, not in the middle of the night. I'm waiting for that, but I get them all the time. And I can answer simple questions for people. Like sometimes girls will reach out and say, it's only been 2 weeks since my last period. How soon should I wait for coming in for a test? So we became accessible 24 hours a day. So with the pandemic, you would think, okay, they're shut down, not much is happening. That isn't the case, because we had that helpline. We had text and calls coming in throughout that entire period, and we actually increased the influence that New Direction had in Berkshire County. So we know that was God. So that we kept the helpline going. And we're accessible 24 hours a day. So before, women would have to wait and come into the center when the office was open, or call when we're open. Now they can text or call. So that's something very good that came out of the pandemic. Since we opened, our clients have been increasing. We have, I would say, about an average of 10 regular clients a week. So it's about 45 sessions a month. And they come in for our Earn While You Learn classes, which are our parenting classes. A lot of times, we're criticized in the pro-life movement because they say that all we care about is if the baby's born. Not true. We support the moms, and we walk with them, and we do all the parenting with them. And during COVID, we purchased digital curriculum that we could do virtually or in the office, and it's fantastic. So if someone can't come in, or someone was nervous still because of COVID, there's some that don't want to come in, we can conduct their classes virtually, or we can use the digital curriculum with them right in the office. And it's updated all the time, so there's no updating curriculum anymore. As a former teacher and principal, that is like, what? You don't have to update? No, it's constantly updated. The minute I turn the app on, it's updated to the second. It's amazing. So I always like to look for the good in every season. So there's been some really good in that season. We also had 3 people go through our abortion recovery program, and another one waiting to start. And that's an 8-week course that we offer. Everything is done one-on-one with a client advocate. And it's a spiritual healing program for women that have gone through abortion. And we continue to do our pregnancy testing and our pregnancy options counseling. And as I said, we're open 24 hours a day, so we get much more requests for pregnancy tests because someone can just text me on the phone, thinking about it. So I thought the best way to kind of give you kind of a window into what's been happening at New Direction is to share 2 testimonies that have happened within the last year. And if you get our newsletter, I did put some of the details in there, but I saved some of them for tonight because I think it's better in person. So there are a lot of times when and I'm the one doing the pregnancy testing right now. We kind of have that set up, and we have, I should introduce my volunteers who are here tonight. We have 2 of our client advocates in the audience tonight. If you just wave your hands or stand, Joanne Kahlberg, Susan Kustra, and I also have 2 other volunteers. Yes, there are client advocates. And we have 2 other volunteers helping out as well. Charlene James, our office assistant. And Liz Chapman, who does center support. She does a little bit of everything to help make it run. And so I'm going to be talking about actually a client of Joanne's, but I wanted to share these testimonies with you. So when I'm doing the pregnancy testing and the options counseling, a lot of times, someone will go, oh, I wasn't planning on being pregnant. And I go into, well, how do you feel about that? Well, I guess I'll have the baby. Well, that is a decision for life, but she was probably going to choose for life whether I did the pregnancy options counseling or not. So during this past year, we had 2 dramatic cases where I really believe the Lord used New Direction. And when I say that, I don't mean just me, and I don't just mean the volunteers. I mean all of you in this room, because you're all part of the New Direction family. If you pray and you give to us, then you are part of these stories. So God used New Direction to directly intervene in the lives of two mothers and their children. So using the Texter helpline, I had someone request a time to come in to go over pregnancy options counseling. And then she was a no-show, which happens sometimes, quite a lot actually. So, but now I can text them if they don't want to pick up the phone, which she didn't. And I said, gee, you missed your appointment. You said you wanted abortion information. You were pretty sure you were pregnant. And she just texted back and said, listen, you said you don't refer for abortions. And I really got my mind made up. So I just felt like it'd be wasting your time and wasting my time too. So I texted back, well, you asked for abortion information. I have some, because part of our options counseling is that we go through the abortion procedures with our clients because they need to know what they're choosing. And I can tell you that the one people I've sat with, they did not know what it was. It's just made way too simple in the worldly system. Oh, just get an abortion, get rid of it. No, that's not what it is. So when I said I have abortion information, she didn't take the hook on that. So I said, well, listen, and the Lord showed me to say this. I'm going to put the magazine that we use, and it's a CareNet magazine, before you decide. I'm going to put it out on the mailboxes. And if you want, you can come get it over the weekend at night, or you can just leave it there. Well, she didn't say anything, but I knew I was supposed to leave it. So I did. And then Liz cleans New Direction on the weekend. Thank you, Liz. And I said, go out and look on the mailboxes and see if that magazine is there. I've been praying that she came to get that magazine. So she looked. Magazine was gone. Thank you, Jesus. So step one accomplished. So I waited. It didn't jump. I wanted to text her right away. I didn't. I waited. And then I went into the office and I texted her. And God showed me to say, not did you take the magazine, but what questions do you have from reading the magazine? And then she answered, do you offer any prenatal classes? So I was like, oh my goodness, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. Amen. Amen. I still get choked up. I was so excited. So I made another appointment and I said, will you keep this one? And she said, yes. So I made it with me. And she came in and we sat down and talked, and then she kind of told me her story. She was at Burger King next door to us, and she started throwing up violently, so they rushed her to the ER and thought it was food poisoning, and they kept asking her, should we do a pregnancy test? And she kept saying, no, I'm not pregnant. And finally, the nurse or someone convinced her, we need to do a pregnancy test, and she was pregnant, and she was 4 months along. And she said when she read the magazine and saw the fetal development and saw the abortion procedure that would be necessary at that age of gestation, she just couldn't do it. So I was like, so then I had a really great avenue to say to her, the Lord put his hand on your child to not let you find out about your child till you're into the 4th month when you couldn't do it. Because you're telling me you would have done it if it were much earlier. She said, I would have. I said, so do you see how God didn't let that happen? So we had a really good talk about that. And then right after that, she had moved back to Florida to be with her mom for support and things. But I reached out to her just a while ago to see, and she said the baby was born healthy, and that she often thinks back to that conversation about how God, Jesus help me so I can get these testimonies. How God has his hand on her baby and has a special purpose for her baby. So that was like such a touchdown. That was like all the Lord. And that's very common with the girls and women I talk to. They don't think it's a baby until a certain age, and then it's a baby. And you're going to hear that in the next testimony too. Like, well, I could kill it before because it wasn't a baby, but I can't kill it now because it is a baby. And basically at that stage, I'm just like, okay, you're not having an abortion. That's all. I can't like rewind and try and get you to see, but that's very common worldly thinking. So my next testimony was another story like that, where this little girl, I call her Skater Girl because I don't use her name, but I call her that because she came in off the Pittsfield Skate Park with a skateboard under her arm to get a pregnancy test. She was 17, she looks all of like 14, and her boyfriend had his skateboard. And she wanted a pregnancy test and told me, I'm pretty sure I am because I've done a couple myself. I said, well, like I told you, this is going to be lab quality and, let's do this together. And so she came in and we went through the pregnancy test, and yes, indeed, she was pregnant. And so she right away, right out of the gate, said, well, I'm getting an abortion, and we went into the abortion options counseling. So what happens is when they'll even tell me on the phone sometime, and then I tell them, well, we don't refer for abortions, but I can give you the information you need. So if they come to see us and I'm getting an abortion, every single time, through your prayers and mine, that moves from that to in the middle where now I'm not sure. Like they all cry, they all definitely think it. So that's good. So she came in saying, well, I'm getting an abortion. Then she's crying and looking at the pictures, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. Oh, God, I'm just not sure. So we went as far as we could, and her last thing was, I'm just not sure. But when she left, she gave me a real affirming statement, which is good for all of us who do this kind of work. She said, I just want to thank you for not judging me today. You were so supportive and kind to me. So I'm like, yes, thank you. That's what we're supposed to do. And I want to hear if you didn't feel that way. So she left, and then I always reach out again, and it's like sometimes I don't get discouraged, but when they don't answer, like, ugh. But she answered, so I'm like, so I was thinking about you, wondering what you're thinking today, because yesterday you weren't sure. She said, well, I appreciate the time you took with me, but she said, I'm going to get the abortion. And then God told me to say, I love it when he does this, would you like an ultrasound? We haven't done ultrasounds since we moved to Pittsfield with the pandemic. Our medical director, Dr. Tony, shut them down for the pandemic, but he told me if there was ever a case where I felt it was a matter of life or death for a baby, he would come do the ultrasound himself. So out of nowhere, God says me to say it, it's out of my mouth, and she says, sure. So I'm like, okay. So I hang up the phone, I said, all right, Lloyd, you gotta make this happen. Dr. Tony, our medical director, also goes to Lebanon quite frequently, but he wasn't in Lebanon, he was here. So he said that he would do it, so back and forth, and we pick a Friday night. So now my next issue was that the ultrasound was there, but not set up, and that I'm not a medical person. So I came down Friday morning, I prayed over the room, and Jesus and I got that ultrasound working, and I could not tell you how I did it. But when that sprang to life, I was like dancing. So we're all ready. We got Dr. Tony coming, we've got Skater Girl coming back, and the ultrasound's working. So she came in, and on the table, we had figured out with the girls, we asked for the first day of their last menstrual cycle, and we figure out when they might be due. So we thought maybe 7-8 weeks. So the first thing he said to her, and we see the baby up on the screen, and I'm thinking, oh, it look like 7 or 8 weeks to me. So he right away said, oh, you're much further along than we thought. You're the end of your 4th month into your 5th month. She was such a tiny little thing, and it didn't even show. And he just said to her, look what a healthy baby. The baby's swimming, and baby's in the right place. And so the look on her face was priceless. People have asked me, was it joy? No, it wasn't joy. It was shock. She just was like literally with her mouth open. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. So she sat up, and Dr. Tony said to her, do you have any questions? And that's where I'm holding my breath. Let it be life. And she said, well, yeah, I have a lot of questions. I've never been pregnant before. So we went out in the room, and she had her picture. She said, I'm having this baby. This is a baby. So once again, this is a baby. And I'm having this baby. And then she told me her mother had the abortion scheduled for Tuesday morning. Wow. This was Friday night. And she said, I may get kicked out this weekend. So I told her, and this is what I mean, how respectful the girls are. Like, I've never been woken up at night. She could wake me up at night. I said, you call me or you text me if you get thrown out. We'll work something out. But she didn't need to. She said she had some resources. So her boyfriend had been in the waiting room, and I gave them some literature to read. He said, you can give it to her. I read every single thing in this waiting room when I was waiting. I was so nervous. I read everything. So now these two young people are clients of Joanne's, and she works with them every week. They are committed to each other and the baby. And the young man has a Christian background, and you know, if you raise your child, train them up the way they should go when they're old, they won't depart from it. He says he doesn't believe, but he thinks they should be getting married. And so he's on the right track. And Sue actually has two 17-year-olds, too, that are committed to each other and their baby that she meets with every single week. So I wanted you just to really hear those stories, because they were just the whole reason why we do what we do. And again, when I say we, that means every single one of you. We're doing this because we want to save those babies, and we want to save these mamas too. Like how they, all the pain and regret and heartache they're going to feel years later. So I just want you to know that you're part of that, and we are seeing the consistent girls coming in that go, yeah, I'll choose life and I'll take the parenting classes. That's wonderful. But now we're really, like, from prayers for all these years, we're really seeing the crisis ones come in and God reaching down and saving them. So I want to let you know that you're all part of that and how much I appreciate all of you. That's my report. Thank you very much. I just want to recognize, too, before I introduce our keynote speaker, our board members who are with us tonight. They're an integral part of this whole new direction that we do together. So we have the president of our board, Lynn Toole. Pastor Doug Duncan, who prayed our opening prayer. And Karen Moran. This really will be the last thing. And I also just want to thank the table hosts and hostesses, what an important part you are, and all the underwriters who gave to make this night a success. Thank you all. Our keynote speaker tonight is Claire Culwell. She met her biological mother in 2009. Claire has been affected of every aspect of a crisis pregnancy situation. She's adopted, she's been affected by abortion, and she is a parent to her children. Claire is going to talk to us tonight about how beauty can come out of the unexpected. Please join me in welcoming Claire Culwell.
Well, I'm from Texas, so howdy. Do y'all have any stereotypes about Texans?
You all.
They're probably true. Well, it's an honor to be here with you today, tonight. This is incredible. I'm sorry, I'm trying to reconfigure myself here. It's an honor to be able to be a part of this, as you'll hear as I share my testimony tonight. What y'all are a part of tonight, what New Direction Women's Center is doing in your community is something that is so special and important to someone like me. It's very, very personal. But before I begin, I just wanted to share that I'm honored to be back here in Massachusetts. I was here in 2009. I had the opportunity to share my testimony at your Capitol when I believe the most extreme abortion legislation was introduced that has ever been introduced, aside from the New York law that was very similar. And as someone who's been affected by abortion, you'll hear as those laws were being passed and introduced, I couldn't help but feel or think, like, what about me? What about the person who's been affected by abortion? What about the mother who finds herself in this desperate situation, who doesn't see a way out, who is met with things that are so unhelpful? And I couldn't help but feel so discouraged last time I was here. But today I'm honored to be back, and I feel so hopeful, so encouraged, because you are a part of an organization and supporting an organization that is really doing something in your community for women and children and families. And so I just want to thank you before I begin for being a part of tonight, because it is literally life or death for someone like me and for someone like my birth mother, as you'll hear. I think you'll agree with me that now more than ever, there's never been a more important time in history to be a person of integrity, someone who stands for truth and wisdom, things that are wise and good, someone who isn't ashamed of who God created them to be, and He created us to be set apart from this world. And someone who has confidence in disappointment, because you can trust the God that goes before you. The last part that I shared about trusting the God that goes before you, even in the face of disappointment, even in the face of things that are so hurtful and harmful, that is a huge part of my story and what led me to where I am today. I actually had a completely different plan for my life. I am an introvert and never planned to be on stage sharing my story, but God had bigger plans. And I hope that tonight, as you hear my story, that you will be able to grasp truly the importance of what we're doing here tonight, what we're a part of, and that it will motivate all of us to get involved with what New Direction is doing here. So I will just jump right into my story. I grew up as an adopted child. My sister Rachel and I are both adopted, and my parents actually weren't able to have children naturally, and they knew that the next step was to seek to create their family through adoption. And growing up, we knew that we were wanted, chosen, and loved. We remember actually in middle school and high school, our friends being like, well, gosh, why? Wasn't it hard being adopted? Or what was that like? I mean, what was it like at the orphanage? And we remember being so confused by that. Not that that is someone's story out there, but I think back then everybody had seen the movie Annie. And so that's what they associated adoption with. And we remember being like, well, our adoption story's great. We were so proud of who we were in our family, because our family told us, our parents told us all our life that we were wanted, chosen, and loved. And so we knew when we decided that we might meet our birth mothers one day that circumstances could be difficult. We might be disappointed. We might find out things that are shocking about ourselves, about our birth stories. But we knew that we could go into that meeting with our birth mother knowing that we were wanted, chosen, and loved by our family, by our parents who adopted us, but also by God. That circumstances would never change who we truly were, wanted, chosen, and loved. And so we decided to meet our birth mothers. When I went into meeting my birth mother, and when my sister went into meeting her birth mother, I used to think, I will never be the type of person who's been affected by abortion. I mean, that's just not my story. I've grown up in the church. Somebody who's been affected by abortion will never be me. They're not someone that lives in my community, that goes to my church, that goes to my school, that is a part of my family. And I was so wrong. When I met my birth mother, I learned that I am the person who's been affected by abortion. And I just didn't know it for so many years until I met my birth mother. But my sister actually met her birth mother first. And she had this incredible reunion with her birth mother, and I'll share about that in just a moment. But around that same time, as my sister was preparing to meet her birth mother, I was actually living in College Station, Texas, doing what I planned to do for my life, studying to be a nurse. And I lived in the town where Abby Johnson ran her Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, which is the story of the song Unplanned that we just heard. And I remember every day on my way to school, on my way to work, I would drive past this Planned Parenthood abortion facility. And I had no idea what Planned Parenthood was. All I knew was what they said in their commercials on TV. And so I thought, they're helping people. Well, I stopped one day and I asked these people that were outside doing I didn't know what, standing there facing this clinic being weirdos. I didn't know what they were doing. And so I stopped and I asked them, as they were lined up facing this clinic, what they were doing. And they said, we're here because we know what abortion is, what it does to women and to children. We're here to offer these women alternatives to abortion, resources. We're sending them to places like New Direction Women's Center. And we know that God creates every human child in his image with a purpose. And we want to help the children, but also the mothers. And I thought, that's great. I'm adopted. I know personally what an alternative to abortion can do for a child because I've lived it out. But I thought, I'm an introvert. I don't like to get out of my comfort zone. I don't want to talk about Jesus and abortion and, cause conflict. I just thought that's not for me. And so I walked away that day and kind of wiped my hands clean and thought, they can do that, but I never will. And that was my first glimpse of God's bigger picture and of his bigger plan for my life, because my sister was about to meet her birth mother. And soon after that, I would meet mine and find out the most shocking news of my entire life. My sister had this incredible reunion with her birth mother. I remember the first time I had the opportunity to meet her birth mother just weeks after she did. And we were sitting around a table like this, and I remember just looking at my sister and looking at her birth mother and thinking, oh my gosh, they look so much alike, they act so much alike. I had never seen anything like this before, being an adoptee in a home with only adoptees. And I remember thinking, she didn't have to give me my sister. She didn't have to do that, but she did because she loved my sister so much that she wanted her to have a daddy, something that she couldn't give her. And so she was 30 years old, had placed my sister for adoption when she could have raised her because she wanted something more for her. I mean, that is sacrificial love. And I remember looking at her and just thinking, I have got to thank her. I've got to thank her because my life, my family wouldn't be complete without Rachel, my sister. And so I did. I leaned over and I thanked her for giving me my sister. And that was the moment that I first thought about my birth mother. I hadn't thought about her much because my sister got cards on her birthdays and Christmas. She had an open adoption, even though she didn't meet her until later on. But my birth mother, we didn't know much about. But I knew that no matter what, I knew that there was a possibility it could be scary and uncomfortable, but I knew no matter what, the reason I was going into meeting her wasn't to find who I was. I already knew who I was, wanted, chosen, and loved. But it was to tell her, thank you. My life has been incredible because of you. Thank you. I have a family because of you. Thank you. I have a life because of you. And so I went home and I opened up the conversation with my parents about meeting my birth mother, and they were just as excited about the possibility, although cautious and nervous as well. But we wanted to thank her. And so I picked up the phone and I called my adoption agency the next day, and I told the lady on the phone who answered what my name was and that I wanted to hopefully search for my birth mother, but if she didn't want to meet me, I wanted to just thank her. And the woman on the other line told me her name. It was Debbie. And she said, Claire, this is gonna sound weird. And it did. She said, I'm actually staring at your baby picture on my desk, and I've had it sitting here for 20 years. And she said, you were a very special baby to me. She said, you're so tiny, and you have this little harness on your hips, and you have these casts on your feet. And I used to visit you after your birth mother left the hospital when nobody else was there. I was the only one who visited you until your parents took you home 2 months later. And I thought it was so odd, but what I didn't know was that was my second glimpse of God's bigger picture for my life. She called me on Christmas Eve of 2008 that year, and she said, Claire, I've got the best Christmas present. Your birth mother would love to meet you. And I was so excited. The girls will appreciate this. We thought about what are we going to wear? What are we going to look like? What are we going to listen to? What are we going to eat? What pictures are we going to show her? And we met in March of that year, and I tell you what, the moment I opened the door and laid eyes on her for the first time, I never once heard the music that we played. I never once thought about all the things that we had planned, because I laid eyes on my birth mother and I knew instantly that I loved her so much. And I was so grateful for my life because of her. So we had this incredible first meeting, and we wanted to continue our relationship, and so we set a second meeting up. And it was the second meeting that changed my life forever. I flew to Oklahoma, where my birth mother lives and where she grew up. And on the plane, I had this gift for her. I wanted to give her something that would remind her how grateful I was to her for my life, for my family, for what she had done for me. And so I got her this ring and this necklace with my birthstone on it. And I had a card to go with it. And I remember sitting on the plane on my way there and thinking, what do I even write down? How do I even convey my gratitude towards her? And I didn't know. So I summed it up and I just said, thank you for choosing life for me. So I got there and we had this great first day. My 3 half-sisters were there. My 4-year-old little half-sister at the time was just attached to my hip. It was so much fun. And that evening, things kind of settled down. We put her to bed, and my birth mother was sitting in her lazy boy chair in the living room. And I thought, this is the time. I'm going to give her the gift. And I thought, this is going to be our moment. This is going to be our moment where I tell her everything she's longed to hear for 21 years. And I'm going to break down these lies that maybe she believed about herself, that she wasn't a good enough mother. And I'm going to tell her that she was the best mother for me because of what she had done for me. And so I gave her this gift, and she opened the ring and the necklace, and she started crying really happy tears. And she said, Claire, can you put the necklace on me? And so I was standing to her side, fastening this necklace on her neck, as I watched her read the words in the card, thank you for choosing life for me. And in that instant, everything changed. She said, Claire, I didn't. And I still can't describe the pain and the tears that I saw in her eyes that day as she walked me back to a room in her home where I was staying, and we sat on this bed and we turned to face each other. And with tears streaming down her face and her body trembling like I've never seen anything like it, I can't describe it. She began to tell me about what it was like at 13 years old when she was pregnant with me. And she said her mother took her, after telling her that she wasn't ready to have a baby, she took her to a local doctor who performed abortions, and my birth mother had a D&E abortion procedure while she was pregnant with me. And they told her the same thing that they tell every single little girl like her, every woman, every family that walks into abortion clinics across the country today. They told her that they could fix her problem, that her life would go back to normal, that she wouldn't have this burden or the shame on her family. And she said, Claire, my life never went back to normal. She said, my mother had to take me back a few weeks later to that same doctor because my amniotic fluid had been leaking and my belly was still growing. And when I went in, they told me that you had survived my abortion because you were a twin. And your twin was successfully aborted, but you survived. And she said, my mother took me to another state, across state lines, to have a second abortion, but they turned me away miraculously. They turned my birth mother away because she had been leaking amniotic fluid and it was too dangerous for her. And she said that's when my mother dropped me off at the adoption agency. Debbie was my birth mother's caseworker 21 years before, and then she reunited us. I was born at 30 weeks. As you probably gathered, I was a pretty small baby. I weighed 3 pounds. I had a dislocated hip. I had club feet. I was on life support for a couple months before my parents picked me up from the hospital, and I went through multiple body casts up until the age of 2 to correct what had happened to my body because I was born prematurely, because the abortion had ruptured the sac that I was in. As you can imagine, this was the most shocking news of my entire life. I thought the worst thing that will happen will be she doesn't want to meet me. I never imagined that I would walk into meeting my birth mother and find out that I was rejected, unwanted, and even aborted. And that I would be forever, for the rest of my life, every day I would wake up and say, and be an abortion survivor and a twinless twin in the name of choice. And so in that moment, I had a choice to make myself. I could do what my birth mother fully expected me to do, and that was run out of the room that day and never look back, and choose to be angry and upset and to not forgive her. Or I could do the opposite. I could choose to forgive my birth mother because I know a God that wants to forgive her too. And I knew that if she put her faith and her trust in him, that he would wipe her slate clean, just like he's done for me time and time again. And this was my opportunity. This was my opportunity to be what New Direction is in your community right now, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and to point my birth mother to a loving God that calls her every single thing that my parents told me that they called me and that God called me: wanted, chosen, loved, forgiven, a child of the King, redeemed, and restored. And so I forgave my birth mother, and I believe that God gave me this story for such a time as this, because when I found out my story, I knew, God's fingerprints were all over this. He had protected my life for a reason, and it was up to me whether or not I said, yes, God, I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone to be used by you, even if it means saying those 2 words in the same sentence, Jesus and abortion. Even if it means talking about the most controversial issue of our time and proclaiming the forgiveness and the love and the redemption of God, I'm willing, because you protected my life for a reason. And I didn't know what that would look like. I kind of hoped it wouldn't be standing on stage talking to all of you. But God had bigger plans. And when I realized the first time that I shared our story after I got my birth mother's permission, which is a whole nother story, because this is her deepest, darkest, most painful secret, and she gave me permission to share it with you today. I spoke to this group of high school students, and I got up on stage, and gosh, my legs were shaking like my birth mother's were the day that she told me. And I was so nervous, but all I had to do was tell them that I survived my birth mother's abortion. All I had to do was tell them of what God had done. It didn't matter if I was a good or dynamic or not nervous speaker. All they heard was my story. All they saw was my face and heard my name and saw my humanity standing before them, and they were able to see a clear picture. Hallelujah. They were able to see a clear picture of exactly why this matters to them and to their future and to the future of their children and their grandchildren. Because when they look at the face of an abortion survivor, they see the face and the name, hear the name, and see the humanity of that unborn child. A man came up to me a couple years ago, and I had never thought about it this way before. I knew that the story of an abortion survivor was impactful, but he said, Claire, your story really makes it real for me today. He said, I've cared before. I've heard the stories of post-abortive women like your birth mother, who deeply regret their abortion and oftentimes keep it a secret for 10, 15, 20 years. And I've heard the story of post-abortive men who regret and long for their lost fatherhood, and I care. He said, I've heard the story of other abortion survivors, and I care. He said, but there's something about your story. There's something about the fact that you were a twin. He said, because you were a twin, when I look at your face, I'm literally looking at that unborn child. Because I'm looking at your twin. And I thought, wow. If that is not the bigger picture of why we are here, I don't know what is. What if we let that humanity, that worth that is ingrained in every single one of us, that we are created in the image of God with a purpose, what if we let that move us tonight to action? What if we let that move us to step out of our comfort zones, as God has asked me to do time and time and time again, for things that truly matter, not only for our futures and the future generations, but to the heart of God? What if we let it move us tonight? When I learned that I had survived my birth mother's abortion, I had grown up in church. We were there every Sunday, Wednesday, every time it was open. My parents worked for Campus Crusade for Christ for over 40 years and are still in ministry today. And so you would have thought that as someone who has grown up in that environment that I would have known where to turn, but I didn't. I have to tell you that I went to church all those years and still today, and up until I learned that I had survived my birth mother's abortion, never once did I hear my pastor talk about the reality of abortion, the hope and the redemption and the grace of a God who will work miracles, who will turn ashes into beauty every single time if we allow him to. I never heard about it. And I've learned that I'm not alone in that. My story is unique. I survived an abortion, but there are women and there are men and there are families who are silently suffering in the pews of our churches across the country because of the apathy and the silence of believers like us, of church leaders like I grew up with. And what I noticed is that the abortion industry, you can walk on any college campus, you can go to most people and ask them where a Planned Parenthood is, where the nearest abortion facility is, and they know because the Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is screaming, "We are here for you." And yet we as believers, we are silent. We are apathetic. We are afraid to step out of our comfort zone and extend the grace and the forgiveness of God. And so what I've learned is that it is up to us to come together and to shout even louder that we are here for you, that God wants to restore and redeem and make new. And that New Direction Women's Center is right over there. Every single person in our community here tonight should know of the incredible work of the center. Every single one of us should know where it is, what they do, and be talking about it. We are not living in a time where we can remain apathetic and silent. People ask me often, do you think about your twin and do you have survivor's guilt? And I gotta tell you that ever since that man came up to me, and I look in the mirror every single day when I wake up and I realize that I am looking at my twin, I think about my twin every single day. And I have questions for God, and I could wonder what if all day long, but what I know that speaks louder than all the what ifs and the questions that I have about my twin and about my survival is that I trust the God that has gone before me, and that He has a plan, and my questions are just a small dot in the bigger picture of what He is doing with my story and with my survival. I know that I survived for such a time as this, and so I trust in that. As it was mentioned, I have 4 children. I am so incredibly blessed. My husband David and I live in Austin, Texas, where I grew up with our children, and I have 3 children that I have raised. I married a single dad and have been gifted with the opportunity to raise his children as my own, and they have birth mothers as well. And I have 1 biological daughter. And so if you didn't catch that, there are probably more adopted people in my family than not. My husband is adopted, my mother-in-law is adopted, my sister's adopted, I'm adopted. I have 3 children who are adopted. There's probably more we don't know about. But my 8-year-old daughter is my only biological daughter. And she feels left out. I remember the first time she brought it up, she was about 5 years old, and we were driving the car, and I just hear this little voice behind me, and she goes, "But Mom, what about my birth mother?" And I'm like, sorry to disappoint. Right here. She didn't get that. But she's wonderful. She is a Texas baby. She wears bows as big as Texas. Her name is Sadie June, so there you go for a Texas stereotype. And the day I had her, the day I gave birth to my daughter, I knew it would be special. But I had no idea what it would truly mean for me and for the work that I do and the impact that my story is having. If you think that looking at an abortion survivor is proof that God created every human being in his image, you should look at the child of an abortion survivor. And you should think about their offspring and generation after generation that would be missing. Because when I held my daughter in my arms for the first time, I realized, oh my goodness, my birth mother told me that I was a miracle, but she is miraculous. Because Sadie Jean wouldn't be here if that abortion had been successful on my life as it was meant to. That is the reality of abortion. Every single woman that walks into an abortion clinic, that moment does not just affect her life and that one child's life. It affects generation after generation after generation. And likewise, every single woman that walks through the doors of New Direction Women's Center, that moment does not just affect her life and that child's life. It ensures that the lives of generation after generation after generation will be born and will live out the calling that God has on their life, we pray. But regardless of that, their life was created in the image of God. And we know that it's so encouraging to me to know that lives like mine, lives like my daughter's will be ensured because of the work that we are supporting tonight. I want to ask you tonight, as I mentioned about stepping out of our comfort zones and being that person of integrity who stands for truth, who does something for things that matter. I want to ask you to step out of that comfort zone with me tonight. And I don't know what that looks like for you, but I know that when I come to these events, I usually have a plan. I usually have a plan of how much I'm going to give, how much I'm going to get involved, how I might add this ministry to my prayer list. So many different things come to mind, but specifically tonight, how we're going to give. And I want to ask you to just pray about that. Ask God, because I promise you, as you've heard tonight, his plans are always bigger and better than any plan that we could have for ourselves. And so I ask him how he would have you give. Ask him how he would have you serve. Ask him how he would have you step out of your comfort zone and pray. Ask him how he would use you tonight in your willingness. And I promise that he will bless you abundantly for your obedience to him tonight. I'll leave you with one story. I know that my story can be really hard to hear. It's a really hard story to tell. One of the most painful, eye-opening moments of my life. And I thought, okay, that's all you can do with me. Like, you've got to be done with me, God, because you've asked me to step out of my comfort zone. You've asked me to share this story across the world. You've asked me to share my emotions and my vulnerability and my birth mother's deepest, darkest secret on stages to give people a clear picture of why this matters, why we need to be the person of integrity who stands for truth. And I thought he was done with me, but he wasn't. A couple years ago, I learned that about 2 days before I came to speak at a fundraiser like this for a pregnancy center, I learned that the organization had found my birth mother. And they said, surprise, we're bringing her in We're going to sit her in the front seat, and she's going to hear you speak. I have to admit, I was pretty upset. I was feeling pretty upset about the fact that I was going to put my emotions on display for this fundraiser so that they could raise money off my emotions. And I was going to have to look in the eyes of my birth mother and see what I saw 12 years ago when I met her. And I thought, there is no way I can do that. And I hung up the phone and I called my parents, the same people I called when I found out that I had survived my birth mother's abortion. And my dad said the exact same thing to me that he said 12 years ago when I met her. He said, Claire, imagine what you can do. Imagine what God can do with your willingness. You absolutely have the right to say no, and if you don't feel comfortable, you tell them no. But pray about it and imagine what he could do. And I'm like, dang it. So I hung up the phone. I knew already, okay, that we're moving forward. We're displaying the emotions. We're going to let God use me. So I went to this event in Nashville and I spoke, and afterwards it was the hardest speech I've ever given in my life as I watched my birth mother relive every moment of being pregnant with me at 13 years old. But I brought her on stage afterwards and I honored her. I introduced her to the audience, and we both had tears in our eyes but smiles on our faces. And she grabbed my hand and she lifted our hands up together. And I knew this was our victory moment. That's what I like to refer to it as. This was our victory moment because we have victory over what abortion has done to us, even though it has hurt us so deeply. And we have victory because we know that one day Christ will come back and he will make all things new and he will make all things right. That is our hope tonight. But until then, make the commitment with me tonight to be the person of integrity, to be the person who stands for truth, who prays for things that matter daily, who's bold in how you serve and how you love the people in your community, who doesn't compromise or remain apathetic on things that truly matter to the heart of God. And what we're a part of tonight, it does. Be a person who stands in the gap for women like my birth mother who are desperately looking for someone like you to stand up for her. Be a person who steps out of their comfort zone and gives generously tonight. I promise that it will be worth it. Thank you so much for having me and for being a part of this God-honoring ministry tonight. God bless.